Hello, and welcome to Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. I am always keen to hear your feedback, particularly in relation to the kinds of leaders you would like me to invite onto the show in future. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rich insights from our special guest. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. This week, I am delighted that Zaf Karim has joined us in the studio. Emerging from the humble streets of East End London to the prestigious halls of Cambridge University, Zaf Karim exemplifies success and resilience in the tech business world. A successful businessman serving on both public and private company boards, he has mastered the art of steering fledgling tech companies to towering IPOs, following an illustrious decade-long journey in investment banking with companies like Salomon Brothers and Rothschild. Zaf is the founder and CEO of BlockApt, a cybersecurity business headquartered in London, whose mission is to help people protect and defend their digital assets. Developed over time as a toolkit to help small and large enterprises, BlockApt's platform brings together disparate systems through a single interface and focuses on cybersecurity. Beyond being a seasoned business leader, Zaf is a trailblazing Oxbridge alumnus, being the first in his family and the sole representative from his school to attain this milestone. Zaf, welcome to the show.
Andrew, thank you for having me.
Great. Well, I'm sure the audience wants to get to know you a little bit. So just open up by telling us a little bit about yourself and where your current focus is.
So right now, I'm focused on tech businesses, primarily in AI, blockchain, fintech, cybersecurity. So that they kind of link into each other. And the idea is to, as you said, take fledgling businesses to a very large scale, etc., and then hand them over to another person who takes them even further. I serve on a couple of advisory boards to help other tech founders, and that's pretty much what I do. And then I have a wife and daughter who keep me under check. So there you go.
Excellent. And I know you put a lot of effort and energy into your work, but just give us a little bit of insight about what do you do to relax and switch off, and how does that inform your energy for your work?
I think relaxation for me, a lot of people would say it's not really relaxation. So if I'm focusing on one thing, in one business fairly intensely, then a break for me is then spending a little bit of time thinking about another problem or another business, totally unrelated, and that's actually a break because you're having to tackle a different set of issues, etc. And the two things cross-fertilize each other. The second thing is I read a lot, typically 2 to 3 books at once. I'm a big, I don't want to advertise, but Kindle fan because you can carry around lots of books. And they tend to be factual books, biographies, books on AI, for example, at the moment, books on self-help, self-improvement. I'm continuously reading those, sometimes historical books, etc. But tend to be factual. Occasionally there's a fiction book, a brilliant fiction book comes out, and I'll read it because brilliant fiction is based on real life, essentially. And then I tried to go for a 5-mile run once or twice a week. Though at my age, my daughter says, "Well, that's more like a fast walk, isn't it, Daddy?" So, they say it as it is. So I'm not going to complain. I still do it.
Absolutely. We love to hear that. And I love reading as well. I'm with you. The Kindle just goes everywhere with me, and it's just fantastic to have that with me all the time. What's the one biography that you've read and you actually think everyone should read that, just in terms of some of the learnings that's within it?
Oh my God, that's the one. Um, I, I, Given my background and the journey I've taken in the field, I guess people will find it strange, but it's probably Arnold Schwarzenegger's biography.
Oh, I want to read
It's
that. I want
called
to read that.
Total Recall, I think, from memory. Um, and normally I don't read autobiographies because it's written by. But this is actually a very honest biography. He talks about the errors he made, and if he looks back on it, it wasn't his grandest moment, for example. But the reason that's a hard question. I could name so many more. The reason I picked that one is because I cannot think of anybody who has in one lifetime scaled and got to the top of three different extremely competitive professions. So first, as a bodybuilder, you know, he's the most famous bodybuilder in the world, arguably the most successful, etc., etc. And then, despite his um, famous Austrian accent and uh, acting ability, he scaled the heights of Hollywood. I mean, it's incredibly competitive. It's all in one lifetime. And then he becomes governor of California. So you've gone from bodybuilding to, which is, I guess, a very self-centered thing in terms of, it doesn't depend on other people. You work in the gym and you become really good and you win or you lose. To having a fan base of millions and millions, so that does depend on other people. To becoming the governor of California, which is, I think it's the richest state in the US, the largest state certainly, and so arguably, if he wasn't a naturalized American, if he was a born American, God knows he could be in the White House. So I can think of many others biographies I've read. I've read The Journey by Tony Blair, but that's one field he achieved. Again, not taking anything away, but I cannot think of anyone who's in three different fields. So yeah, um,
I
I
love
can give
that,
you a
and our
list of
audience.
10, but
No. Well, our audience is going to love that, because obviously that's where they're listening to this podcast and watching this show as well, because of the successful leadership lessons as well. So that leads us nicely, Zaf, into this next question, which is, can you remember what early experiences in your life most shaped your leadership style?
I didn't know they were going to be this hard. uh, Early experiences in my life which shaped my leadership style. Okay, so first, I think my leadership style has definitely evolved over time and changed for the better, and is now much broader, right? However, if I go back to the early stages of when I was in leadership positions, um, I think the fact that, look, I was born and brought up in the East End of London in the 70s and 80s. Um, East End of London is infamous for various things, and at that time it was infamous for, unfortunately, racism. Um, and so it gave me and again, immigrant parents, they did the best they could for us, which is great. I don't, um, you've got to look at where they came from compared to where they came from to what they did. My journey is probably shorter. um, um, but you have to be very resilient because you were living in a poor household. When you went outside, you uh, you may get racially abused or something. It wasn't a nightmare at all at the time. That was just life, and you just got on with it. So there were two or three lessons there. One was, oh, it doesn't matter what the outside is or what other people are doing, or, oh, it's unfair. Well, you either get on with it or you don't. You can sit there and be the victim and say, "Oh, it's unfair," and everything else. And then the second thing is resilience. So if something happened, you get up and you go again because there is no safety net. And in leadership, that's informed my natural style of leadership being, look, do you want to do this or don't you? If you don't want to do it, that's fine. There's lots of other jobs out there that you can go and do. But if you want to do this, then you get on and you do it. Now, if I roll back several, so if I roll forward several years, starting at a place like Solomon Brothers in 1990, when it was the toughest, meanest investment bank in the world. And in fact, I was, there was a book written about it, Liar's Poker, and there's people in that book that I actually worked for. And, it shows this really kind of macho culture and anything goes and you win at all costs and everything else. So again, that shaped my initial management style because it was tough. It was ruthless. Look, you have to work through the night to do this. Oh, you don't want to do that? Well, then maybe you shouldn't be here. Now that works in certain environments, very high pressure, extremely high reward, etc., etc. But I was in investment banking for 12 years. And so if you combine that with the ruggedness of my childhood, that's a nice way of putting it, and you combine that with the ruggedness of investment banking and how cutthroat and sharp it is, when you come out of that, you realize that you can't apply that management style to people in general. Yeah. But that's the basis of it, and the basis is growth, because you've got to continue growing, you've got to continue getting better. Accountability, you've got to be accountable for what you do. Your people have got to be accountable. And meritocracy, if you're good, that's great. If you're bad, I'm sorry, but there are no medals. If you're bad, you don't get a medal for turning up. You get a medal for doing you get your job for doing your job. You get a medal for doing something good. Now that's real people. Some people think that's very harsh and everything else, but if you want to achieve a lot, that's what you got to do. Again, my management style has moderated and everything over the years because I've been working with a much broader variety of people. But those three fundamental things, growth, accountability, meritocracy, and then backed by you just get on with it and you're resilient. They definitely come from my early experiences, as in school, at university. And at university, I was I didn't realize it, but I was odd. Because of where I came from, my accent and everything else, the way I behaved, and I was very forthright, and often people thought, God, Zaf, he just goes and accosts people. Well, for me, it was normal. If I needed something, somebody wasn't going to give it to me, I had to go and get it myself. So me going up to someone and say, hey, can you help me with this? And the polite halls of Cambridge, people thinking, oh, that's a bit forward, isn't it? So those things are my natural character. I apply them to myself, but I apply them to my leadership as well. But then, you broaden that out to become a better and better leader. Does that kind of make sense?
It does. And what I'm interested and curious about as well, I'm sure the audience will be, is when you left that bubble of investment banking and the way you had to behave to succeed, and then had to change and adapt your style to a different kind of environment. Can you remember back to what you found most challenging about that transition? What was it that was most difficult for you?
I think it was the following. It was almost a clash of culture. So, for example, I might go to someone and be very direct with them. Yeah. And they would see it as, oh my God, that was so harsh. That was, and for me, it was, that, that wasn't harsh. You think that was harsh? I'm just telling you what you did right and what you did wrong, you know. Um, and so becoming aware that, in investment banking, and when I was growing up, it was just very direct and very in your face. So, I have a thick skin probably because of that. If I didn't, I wouldn't have survived. Having the assumption that everybody has a thick skin, an assumption I didn't know I had. It was just an implicit thing. Everybody has a thick skin, and you can be direct to everybody, and etc. It was becoming aware that everybody's not like that. You see, let me put it this way, right? These very thoughtful questions, they're really making me think.
Thank you, Zaf. Thank you.
I'm not happy about this. Of course I'm happy about it. So let me put it this way. So you got to think, East End of London, it's an environment, it's a particular type of environment, but you meet lots of different type of people, but they're all from that environment, the immigrants or kids of immigrants, etc., and it's forever changing. Everybody hustles and the rest of it, right? Cambridge, extremely narrow, right? Everybody's super bright, yeah. Okay, they're from different backgrounds and everything else, but they are a very small cohort of people, just naturally because of the intelligence, right? And so it's almost like if I was a Martian and my first experience of the UK was Cambridge, when I left Cambridge, I would say, why is everybody so dumb? Not because everybody's so dumb, but because what I was exposed to was everybody was so bright. And so then going from that to Solomon and Rothschilds, where essentially it's a continuation of that, but then you take those bright people and it's the really determined, hardworking, trusting, ambitious one. So you've narrowed that down into even more of a distillation of. So the intellect is there, maybe at varying levels, but then here everybody's very ambitious, very hard driving, and then so you've had that for 15 years of your life, and then you come out to the real world. It's like the Martian coming down and saying, oh, all people aren't like this. In fact, 99.9% of people aren't like this. There's learning all those other things. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And what I love about the story that you've told so far is there's this understanding, not that you knew at the time necessarily, what it was from your early years that shaped you into the leader that you became, and obviously the environment that you were in shaped you even further. Then you became aware when you came out of that environment that you had to adapt, and that always takes time, and you learned how to do that. What I'm interested in is that as you get older, and as we get older, we also learn that sometimes it's difficult to sustain those good leadership habits because we're sometimes triggered. I love the way that Shirzad Chamine talks about saboteurs and how we're triggered by some kinds of people in a relationship. So how do you sustain the leadership style that you've developed and keep those saboteurs at bay and those negative thoughts that sometimes trigger us?
Well, saboteurs. So if I think of saboteurs as people that deliberately or most unlikely, but unknowingly are harming the business or what you're trying to achieve or whatever. I think if you asked me this 20 years ago, I would have said fire them. The kind of investment banking, and if they go to the courts, just throw 50 grand at them and bye bye. Right? Maybe again, that's a bit of an unfair representation of investment banking, but I'm doing it for effect. Whereas now, you look at that and you think, okay, as you said, you mature as a leader. And but if you don't mature, if you stop growing, I have this kind of attitude where you're either growing, there's no stalling, or you're dying, right? Because growth is, if that's zero, growth is everything above zero, and dying is everything below zero. There's only one zero. So from a probability standpoint, you're either growing or you're dying. The chances you're at zero are zero, and infinitesimal. So you grow as a leader, and you develop a greater awareness of yourself and a greater awareness of other people. And so when you have saboteurs, you got to think, is that malicious or is that entirely innocent? And then if it's innocent, how do you deal with that person to get the best out of them? But if it continues, then what do you need to do? Because maybe you need to remove them from the business. But then again, at the same time, you got to look at I'm involved in, fledgling business. And, if you've got a business of 500 people and you need to fire five of them, it's not going to have a massive effect on the business unless they're all the executives or something, right? But if you've got a business which is just growing and it's got 20 people and there's just two or three of them that, you may be sabotaging the business, then the way you deal with them has to be very different, because if you just remove them, you may negatively impact the business. Yeah. So you got to balance the stability of the business, the growth of the business, with removing the people. And it may be something that, it may be a process and you think, okay, we've got to do it this way or we've got to do it that way. And this way, that way may be a training program. It may be, just making them aware. It may be, okay, this is going to work out, but, we need to get this role done somehow. So it very much depends on the situation. As I say, if your business is 10,000 people or something, then these things are much easier unless, you're firing someone from the board or the executive suite or something. But when you get to low levels of management or indeed junior people, it's a much, much easier thing. Does that
And in the leadership, no, it does.
answer
Yeah,
the question?
yes, it does. And I'm also interested in a follow up to that, which is in the leadership role that you have now and all the experience that you have. And you've already said some of the reading that you do as well is around self development as well around that. So, what are you aware of that in the next 5 to 10 years, when you're involved in businesses, that you need to watch out for in yourself? What is it that you need to almost catch yourself recognizing that you can fall into these kinds of habits sometimes which don't help?
I guess I guess as a leader, um, you're always growing, or you should be growing. Yeah, maybe you're not. Who knows, right? And so every day, every month, whatever, brings new challenges, and you should absorb them. Because if you don't continue growing, then you stall. And you know what I said about stalling. You're not stalling. You're going backwards. And so you have to be very open, and reflect and think, is there something different I could have done? Or no, is this a slam dunk kind of thing? But at the same time, as a leader, you have to have confidence in yourself, because everybody's looking up to you to do, to do the stuff. A lot of people say, they follow the leader, they look to the leader for answers, and yet I certainly don't have all the answers. And any leader that says they have all the answers, they may say that to their troops. Don't worry, I've got a solution and everything else. But in reality, any leader who genuinely believes they have all the answers, I mean, all I can say is good luck to them. You see, there was something I saw on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, which was brilliant, and it was an interview with Elon Musk, and it was about leadership, and he said, what you got to realize, I think it was about leadership or being a CEO. He said, what you got to realize is, being a CEO is the worst job in the world. And they said, actually, it's a great job as well, but it is the worst job in the world. And the interviewer said, why is it the worst job in the world? And he said, because as a CEO, you basically get, he used slightly different words, I think, but you basically get the distillation of all the problems that no one else has been able to fix. So in a company, you're fixing lots of problems. Yeah. And if a problem isn't fixed, it goes to the next level and the next level and the next level and the next level. And so all the problems that nobody else in the company has been able to fix end up on your desk. That's why it's the worst job in the world. It's a distillation of all problems, and they're the biggest and most intractable problems. So you have to be prepared for that. You have to have the confidence to say, okay, this is the way we're going to handle it, and this is the way we're going to go. Even though you can't have all the answers. What is business about? It's about trying to get your company to the next level, which means you have to make predictions about the future. Nobody can predict the future, otherwise they'd be God or something. But but nobody has the resources to do everything. So you have to say, okay, we're going to go in this direction. You're always going to get criticized because we watch sport and we're all sitting in the stands criticizing the team. Those players probably know a little bit more than we do. And all the players are criticizing the captain. The captain's probably in his position because he knows a little bit more than they do, right? So you're always going to get criticism. So you have to be thick-skinned. But at the same time, you can't be tin-eared. I think you have to be open, but you can't dilly-dally. You can't, I don't know if I should do that. You have to be decisive. You're a leader. People are going to look up to you to make the decisions and take them forward. And if they don't, then you're not the leader, are you? Or why should they be working for you?
What I love about what you've said there as well is that decisiveness and that openness. And there's a very fine line. You were talking about this ability for a leader to reflect on what I did, what I've done, what I didn't do. And that's not about questioning myself or doubting what I did. It's just actually opening up reflection to other opportunities and other variables that might be useful to take into account next time. So I really love the fact you've mentioned that, because not a lot of leaders create enough time for reflection. And I think that's a great example you've given there, the importance of doing that.
Well, I don't know. I mean, look, I don't know, but I'd say great leaders do a lot of reflection. They just don't do it in the open. So we may not think they're reflecting, which is a very different thing. I mean, if I sat around, reflecting in front of my troops and everything, he's not very decisive. Leader, he doesn't know what he's doing. He's always second guessing himself, and we should be second. So I think great leaders reflect, but they may be doing it in private, when they're having on their golf course or playing with their kids, or I think you can't openly reflect in front of your your acolytes, because then that mystique of that's the person we're going to follow to kingdom come and go to war for and everything else and the rest of it. So, but again, maybe I'm wrong. Who knows?
We've all got a view on that. So brilliant to have heard your journey so far. And there'll be people out there now in the audience resonating with your background, what you've been through, how you've had to adapt. So if we were to summarize what advice you would give to leaders out there who can relate to this story and it resonates for them in how they channel their earlier life experiences, whether that's in childhood or their earlier career, wherever that might be, and how they channel that into sustainable, successful leadership, what pieces of advice would you give to them?
I don't think at core you can change who you are, because I think that's kind of formed, from your early experiences as kids, childhood, and then teenage, and then your early adult life. I think that's kind of formed then. However, I think you can take those things and use them to your advantage, because every trait has disadvantages and advantages. I'm quite forthright and stuff and everything else. And so that works well in situations which require that. But it might not work well in a collegiate situation where everybody mulls over things for days and days and days and then reaches a consensus. So once you recognize what your natural style is, I think you should do things which complement that. Somebody who's naturally shy and not particularly confident, or, that seeks approval, etc., etc., might not make a great leader in that type of situation, but they might in a different situation. So that's one thing. So there's no, this is a bad trait and this is a good trait. I think they all have their position. I think generally, as a leader, you have to be thick-skinned, right? Everyone will say, "Oh, he could have done that better," or "Why didn't you do this?" or "Why didn't you do that?" or "Why didn't she do this?" or "Why didn't she do that?" And but I've mentioned this before, but not tin-eared, because there'll be a lot of noise, and you have to filter out. That's actually quite important. Okay. And then whether you've come from, the east end of London or Knightsbridge, I think you have to be open to growth and continue to grow and continue working on yourself, because that's the way you'll get better and better and better. Now you might reach a level and you think, "Now, hey, this is good enough for me," right? But I haven't reached that level. It's a normal thing for me to question myself all the time, but at the same time, when I'm in my role of leading, to be fairly decisive, but I'm constantly thinking, and when the information changes, I change my mind if it merits it. So I may go down a path, and then information comes, and information comes, and I think, you know what, this is the wrong path, and you're going to have the strength to think, you know what, this is the wrong path. We need to change the track. I think the you see, leadership has so many contradictions. One of the biggest things that gets in the way of being effective is ego. But at the same time, if you don't have a certain amount of ego, you'll never become a good leader, because that's what drives you to that level, wants to make you be in charge, wants to give you the confidence to follow your convictions. But if your ego gets in the way of making the right decisions or not listening to anyone, now everyone will talk, but you've got to figure out, is this just noise? Is this just uninformed? Is it, and is this valuable? So, look, currently one of the, I guess, least popular professions, or least in the country, is being a politician, right? Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not. I don't want to unduly criticize any professional or anyone else. But why? And that's because they have to make decisions, and you will extremely rarely, if ever, make a decision that you can't please all the people all the time. But if you have to make a decision, then you have to make a decision. And if you're incapable of doing that, then you're not going to be a leader, are you? But that decision means you have to have conviction. You have to take the data into account. And that includes listening to people, not everybody, but listening to the right people. Everybody's going to want to say something, but not all opinions are the same. And there's opinions, there's expertise, etc., etc. And then you have to make the decision, and there's going to be people that are going to be unhappy. So that requires a certain amount of ego to have the belief in yourself that that's the way to go. There are going to be things that trigger you, because if you're brought up in a particular environment, bad manners by what you think are good manners may trigger you, and you may think, and you just got to realize that the world is much broader than where you were brought up. And so that bad manners, is it actually having a negative effect, or is it just, let it go. There may be things that trigger you because you had a very dominant figure as a kid. It may have been a bully at school, it may have been a school teacher, it may have been a parent or something. And then if somebody has those traits or behaves like that to you, it might trigger you. But you have to kind of recognize that, and then see, okay, it's not even overcoming, it's recognizing it and think, okay, this is happening. I need to pipe down on that because that's just an emotional response. These are really thoughtful questions. They're making me really think. This is good. I like this.
Well, I love
It's a
the fact that the
challenge.
audience is learning from you as well. And the thing I picked up there, and all of my guests on this show have this in common, is that yes, there's a healthy ego that's needed to drive great leadership combined with decision making. But as you said, it's about the awareness that's then required, the self-awareness about how to manage that ego appropriately, when to really let it shine and when to really manage it and keep it, down in that sense. And I hear exactly what you're saying. So some great lessons there. Thank you. One final question I've got for you before we come to the end of the show, and it really plays to what you said before about your constantly learning and still working out there, and enjoying it. So in the next few years, Zaf, who or what will you be in service of in the future, and how can people contact you to collaborate if they want to get involved in that, support you, help you? What is it you're going to be in service of in the next few years?
Oh God, I think you have to ask my bosses, my wife and my daughter. But because they're not here, I shall risk speaking in their place. um, um, so, so first, I am going to continue to be involved in technology companies. I think technology is the future. Technology has actually always been the future. Whether we went from the kind of the steam age to the electric age to the transistor age, it's always the future. I love technology. Um, as a kid, when I was 13, 12, 13, I can't remember. I taught myself to computer program. It's just fascinating. Um, so I'll almost certainly be involved in AI in metaverse, cyber, blockchain. So that will be my focus. Um, in fact, I'm on the advisory board of a metaverse company, so I'll probably be involved in a number of advisory boards, but also in some executive roles in this area. I think the second thing is there's a growing realization. I think it's brilliant. It's long overdue, but that's evolution. Things take time. That diversity is actually valuable in itself. So if you have a boardroom of people who all went to the same red brick school, the same red brick university, and all their parents knew each other, then in that boardroom, when you're making decisions, you're just going to have a certain perspective and a certain amount of views. But if that board is far more diverse, then you will get to a better outcome just by considering the other perspectives and the other views. And the people on that board will all be very capable people, but because going back to childhood and life experiences and everything else, they will have different perspectives. So I'm a promoter of diversity. I think it's a good thing in itself. And when I say diversity, I mean not just racial diversity, but gender diversity, class diversity, everything else. That doesn't mean you just put token people in for the sake of it, but it's race, class, gender, etc., etc. There will always be a capable people, and if you bring together a diverse group of capable people with good leadership, 99 times out of 100, you'll get a better outcome than if it's less diverse. So tech diversity. Um, 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 Being on board, people are setting up businesses or whatever, being an advisor to them, giving the benefit of what I've learned. Right? They can take it or they can leave it, but sharing that. And I've got to keep myself busy. So executive roles in terms of turning things around, etc., etc. There's nothing better than finding someone who's who's uh, who's who's very willing to learn. That's almost more important than capability per se. Willing to learn and willing to put the graft in and everything else, and then if you can mentor them or coach them or whatever, and seeing them develop. I mean, I experience it with my daughter at the moment. She's only 8, so I'm not sure whether she's mentoring me or it's the other way around. It's a debate. But there's nothing better than that. I mean, I in my time had one or two really good mentors, and I didn't realize they were mentors or they had a big effect on me until much later. But, I've been fortunate in my journey. The diversity has been there, not just in terms of East End to Cambridge to Wall Street, but in terms of the people I've met and everything else, but also in terms of what I've done from finance to general management to tech. The diversity is there, and so that's given me a lot of experience. But that hasn't been handed to me on the spoon. I've had to hustle for it and get it and everything else. And there's lots of other people that it wouldn't be handed to them on the spoon. Again, there's nothing wrong if it's handed to you on the spoon. Good luck to you. But there's a far greater number of people who won't have that. And if I can impart that knowledge to them, in some way or the other, that's brilliant.
Brilliant. Well, Zaf, I really appreciate you sharing your experiences with our audience today. It's been a brilliant time spending with you. I know that many of them will have been inspired to reflect on their own leadership style and how they might make a different approach to that in terms of leading themselves and also the teams that they manage. So thank you for your input today. I hope you all enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can find out more information about conscious leadership and self-coaching by just typing in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or Google. And until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious. Goodbye. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can access all previous episodes of the show at confessionsofaSuccessfulLeader.com. If you are interested in finding out more about conscious leadership and self-coaching, just type in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or your favorite browser, and you'll find my contact details and all the content that you need. Until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious.